pupunta naman na tayo ngayon sa Indian philosophy. And particularly, no, sabi ko nga kay Jed kanina nung wala ka pa, Sean, there were 3 or 4 prominent contemporary or modern philosophers from India, or specifically from for Hinduism. But syempre, wala tayo sa face-to-face. We're overloaded with knowledge. So, yun, magfo-focus na lang tayo kay Gandhi, which is siya naman kasi, no, yung pinaka-known na philosopher. Actually, di ba, Gandhi is a lawyer, but he himself, no, he doesn't look at himself as a politician or someone na leader or someone na inclined sa political field. Instead, para sa kanya, he is more of a philosopher, sabi niya. It's just that yung kanyang mga theories and ideas, very political. Pero para sa kanya, he's a philosopher rather than a what do you call this? Rather than a politician. So, yun. So, the real name of Gandhi, of Mahatma Gandhi, is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, no? Or Mohandas K. Gandhi. Now, hindi siya pinanganak sa mayaman na family. Mas tamang sabihin na pinanganak lang siya sa middle class na family. And because there's no formal training for him in philosophy, or in other terms, hindi naman siya nakapag-aral sa mga prestigious schools, no? Majority is self-taught, and yung mga turo ng kanilang sariling religion. So therefore, sabi dito, no, ang ganda nung sabi dito, because of no formal training, his early life was spent in deep faith in a transcendent God who created the world of things and beings. So yun lang yung focus ni Gandhi, that God is the creator of all beings. That's it. Yun yung kanyang belief sa kanyang religion. So sabi dito, you cannot reduce Gandhi's concept of God to any of the accepted political theories. So para kay Gandhi, no, walang laman ang mga terms na monotheism, no, atheism, or yung mga ism na yan. Because there's only one belief for him. No, para sa kanya, it doesn't make sense yung mga iba kasi hindi naman siya naniniwala doon. No? He just believes that God is the creator of all, and that's it. That's why hindi mo siya pwedeng i-categorize on a philosophical point of view, no? Or lagyan ng term na gagamitin doon, no? It's not possible. So, yun. Even the distinction between theism and pantheism have no meaning for Gandhi. And though his religion is monotheistic, of course, is theistic, that he believes in God, syempre. Yun yung hindi mo matatanggal dun na part. He believes in God. So that's all that matters for Gandhi. So he did not reject the world as illusory and seek salvation for himself. Ang belief para kay Gandhi is not something na self, no, concentrated on the self, but instead, sabi dito, the suffering of millions of people in India was too deeply ingrained in his nature to think of individual enlightenment and happiness. His strong sense of duty towards suffering fellow beings, no? Meaning that uh, his concept, no, or his point of view of religion is not something na para sa sarili. Instead, nakikita niya eh. It's true, nangyayari. There's suffering, there's no, nung panahon niya may war na nagaganap. Nasa under sila ng British no, Empire in which there are millions who died. There were suffering, no, sobrang madaming paghihirap. And sabi ni Gandhi, you cannot remove that in the history, especially of India. Because no, tawagin na natin na it's the dark side of history. It's the dark truth, no, the harsh truth of history. And it cannot be removed. Sabi nga, no, like in the history of the church, di ba may dark ages tayo. No, you cannot, hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na okay, kasi mga hindi mabuti ang nangyari doon nung times. So let's disregard it. No, it can't be done. Hindi mo yun pwedeng gawin because it's a part of history. It's the part of the reality of history. And yun yung napansin ni Gandhi. That his beliefs should not only be for the self, but instead also for others, especially of his fellow beings. Now note that the term he used is fellow being, not fellow man. Because for Gandhi, if he talks about a being, para sa kanya it includes animals, not just man, no, not just human beings, because para sa kanya, syempre, which is tama naman yung kanyang defense, may buhay din sila. So they are as important as us. Yon. So we cannot dismiss the suffering of our fellow creatures as unreal, no, and try to provide an alibi for ourselves. No, sabi ko nga kanina, you cannot disregard the suffering of others. So one of his early realizations was that God is truth, which is majority naman, no? God is truth. And then meron siyang deeper na realization nung tumanda na siya, no? Which is the concept that it's not just that God is truth, but more importantly, the truth is God. Ang ganda nung pagkakasabi niya. If God is truth, then therefore the truth is God, sabi ni Gandhi. So para kay Gandhi, no, if truth exists, then therefore, logically, God exists. Yun yung kanyang defense naman kung bakit siya naniniwala that God is truth and vice versa. The truth is God. So there are terms that Gandhi used. The terms ahimsa, no, and satyagraha. Ahimsa means non-violence and satyagraha on the other hand means truth. So yun lang yung kanyang major na ideas. Truth and of course non-violence. Yun yung major na laman ng kanyang philosophy, ng kanyang ideas or ideologies for that matter. So so Mahatma Gandhi, moreover, is an spiritual and political leader of India's independence movement. And the independence of India against Great Britain was largely because of non-violent revolutions, no? So more on the non-violence. Um, the majority pa rin, nagsasabi sila that it's not always, hindi naman daw na buong revolution ng India is non-violence or puro Mahatma Gandhi lang. No, you cannot credit everything to Gandhi. Sabi ng ibang historians, the harsh truth about India is that may mga nagbuwis pa rin ng buhay in order to attain this freedom, no, in order to attain this independence. But of course, hindi mo rin matatanggal ang idea na tumulong si Gandhi. To compare it to Filipino culture, no, para mas magets natin. Often we regard Rizal as one of the most important heroes ng Philippines. Why? Because similarly, he used non-violence. There was no blood. It was a bloodless revolution. It was a bloodless fight. And even if that's the case, hindi rin nating pwedeng sabihin na lahat ng freedom na nakamit ng Philippines dahil lang kay Rizal. No? Hindi natin pwedeng i-disregard na namatay si Bonifacio, namatay ang ibang Filipino heroes, no? Ang daming namatay. Yes, Rizal may be ignited and started the revolution, pero meron pa ring blood. No? They still shed blood. Madami pa ring Pilipino ang namatay. And equally, ganun rin ang standing ni Gandhi. Gandhi helped in non-violence, but it doesn't mean na siya lang din lahat ang nagbigay ng independence sa India. So, yon. Any questions dun na part? Any questions, guys?
Ano po yung isang kasunod nung ahimsa, sir?
Ay, wait. Ilagay natin sa saan na yun? Maglagay tayo sa whiteboard. Yan, text. So, the other one is ahimsa. Ahimsa is non-violence, no? Non-violence. And the other thing is satyagraha, which means truth, no? Or truth and fairness. So that's the two main ideas and concepts of Gandhi. So yun. So now let's first concentrate to this concept of ahimsa or non-violence. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word, no, Sanskrit, which sabi ko nga, non-violence. And the literal translation, no, literal, is, it means no harm or no intent to kill. No intent to kill or do not strike. Yan yung mga literal translation niya. And to not injure. Meaning, na kung papansinin nyo, lahat ng mga to is passive. Para on the negative side. Negative in the sense na hindi mo siya gagawin. No, yung root words doon is yung no, puro no, di ba? No, do not. Which means it is on the negative side of a statement. That's why it is also translated to non-violence. So, yon. Ahimsa is an ethical virtue in many Eastern religions. Ito rin ang tandaan nyo, ahimsa is not written or is not original of Gandhi, is not an original concept of Gandhi. It's not from Gandhi himself. Instead, it is used by many Eastern religions including Hinduism, Buddhism, no, Jainism, no, sila yung mga yan. And yon. So, para mas maintindihan natin ang concept ng ahimsa, kung saan siya galing, alam yung concept natin na mga Pilipino ng pagmamano, di ba? Or yung pagbata ka pa lang, tinuturuan ka na gumalang. You know, do you know those kinds of culture that we have? Di ba? Gets nyo ba?
Yes, sir.
Now, that's
Yes, sir.
ganun din ang ahimsa. Ang ahimsa is not something na tinuturo lang or concept lang. Instead, it is, isa siyang concept na isinasabuhay. Bata pa lang ang mga Indians, tinuturuan na sila ng ahimsa that there should be no violence. Just like sa mga Pilipino na kailangan mong maging magalang, magmano. In the same way, ganun din yung kanilang thinking. That it's not, it should be something na natural na sa atin. And that is ahimsa. No, tulad ng sa mga Western siguro, no, kindness, justice. Yung mga concept na yun is natural. And in the same way, that is also the concept of ahimsa as an idea. So, hindi siya original kay Gandhi, pero isinabuhay siya ni Gandhi. Now, ako naman ang magtatanong. Because ahimsa is translated as non-violence or no violence. Scenario 1. No. Is cowardice and running away a form of non-violence? Ikaw, para sa'yo, Jed, is cowardice, no, and running away a form of violence, a form of non-violence, or no?
It is a form of non-violence, sir. Kasi the fact that
Pero,
he did not.
gawa tayo ng example. Kunwari, sinasakop na yung bansa mo, no, or sinasakop na yung personal na rights mo. Do you think that's still a form of non-violence? Pagtatakbuhan mo yon?
Hindi na, sir.
Why?
Kasi, sir, mafo-fall lang naman yan sa non-violence if parang parang kung pwede pang gawan ng paraan, kung pwede pang orang mabigyan ng rason yung magbibigay ng justice. Pero kung sinasakop ka naman, by far siguro ang daming na violate kasi pag sinasakop na tayo Parang alam niyo sir, parang yung mix ng emotions mo, yung ang daming natatrample, maraming mga nag-violate yung rights mo. Bakit kailangan mangyari ito? Wala ba tayong karapatan na lumaban? Pero pag in some cases na kung maliit na bagay lang naman, well, we can siguro yun kung sa non-violence. If it's maliliit na bagay lang naman. Pero kung something that is as big as parang wala ka ng bansa, wala na akong matitirhan, wala na akong pamilya, why not fight for your right, sir? Parang ganun lang.
Oh, very good. Ikaw naman, Sean, if there is already an injustice, tapos you're just turning your cheek away from that injustice? Is that a form of non-violence?
Sir, I do not consider, sir, it's not a non-violent, hindi siya non-violence, sir, kasi in the first place, tinakbuhan mo yun. Magiging non-violence, sir, kapag if you fought against that injustice, tapos you're in a non-violent way, saka siya nagiging non-violence. Kasi sir, kapag tinakbuhan mo, wala ka namang pinaglalaban. Parang parang tinakbuhan mo na yun. It's not considered as form of parang may
Non-violence.
pinaglalaban. Oo,
Oo.
sir.
Tama, no?
Parang-
That's the answer there. Those are not forms of non-violence. No. Instead, para kay Gandhi, those are just forms of cowardice and injustice. Kasi tinakbuhan mo lang. So, kasi nga para kay Gandhi, there are two forms of non-violence. The positive and the negative. No, the positive side, or punta muna tayo sa negative. No? Negative muna. So in its negative form, no, it means not injuring someone, not injuring any living being, no, whether in body or mind. So yun yung tandaan nyo, no? Not just the body, but also the mind. Body and mind. Para kay Gandhi. So therefore, bullying is a negative form of violence, or is a form of violence para kay Gandhi. So, or in other terms, you should not intend to harm towards any living being. So para kay Gandhi, the negative form of ahimsa is the most necessary form of non-violence. Pinaka kailangan. But at the same time, sabi niya, it is the lowest. It is necessary, but this is the lowest. Kasi madali lang siyang gawin. Kailangan mo lang siyang iwasan. Or in other terms, in action, or not in action, or the lack of action. Wala kang gagawin. Kailangan mo lang iwasan yung mga yun. That's why it's negative. Kunwari, cheating, di ba? Pag what's the term? Pag-abuso sa kapwa, those are form of negative forms of ahimsa. No, negative forms of ahimsa. So sabi niya, the practicing of non-violence alone is not being non-violent, sabi niya, but just being unviolent. And para kay Gandhi, unviolence is the weakest form of non-violence. So ang hindi paggawa ng mali is the lowest form of idea kasi nga it should already be embedded in us na hindi ka dapat gagawa ng negative actions. That was why para sa kanya it's necessary na hindi kailangan ituro. And if we focus only on unviolence, it can lead to cowardice, which is the opposite now of non-violence. So, punta naman, so that's now the concept of the negative form of ahimsa. May tanong ba sa negative form of ahimsa?
Sir.
Nan?
Wala po.
So, nakikita niyo ba yung mga tinatype ko?
Yes, sir. Clear po.
Punta naman tayo sa positive side ng ahimsa. So, ito na yung mahirap sa buhay. No, madali lang hindi mag-cheat. Iwasan mo lang naman eh. Madali lang hindi magbisyo. Iwasan mo lang din. Madali lang hindi rin manakit ng kapwa. Iwasan mo lang. But it's hard to do an action on the positive side of non-violence. Para kay Gandhi, he translated or he defined it as the positive form of ahimsa as the largest form, no largest form of love and charity. Kasi ito yung mahirap gawin. Sabi ni Gandhi, madali lang yung negative, mahirap gawin yung positive. No? Sabi dito, universal love and the care for every individual. So, this desire to help others and to live a life of service is the positive side of ahimsa. Sabi niya, if I am a follower of ahimsa, then therefore I must love my enemy. Which is yun na yung mahirap gawin. 'Di ba kahit nga sa Bible sabi niya, 'di ba, love your enemy. And yun, that is the same concept. And at the same time, no, pag may nakikita kang injustice, kunwari, no, napadaan ka sa may kanto, may nakikita kang binubugbog, kapag tinalikuran mo lang, hindi mo siya tinulungan, that's not non-violence. That's being cowardice. The positive side of non-violence is tulungan mo siya. No, hindi naman ibig sabihin na pag tulungan mo siya, bugbugin mo rin yung nangbubog sa kanya. Diba? You can help by maybe talking or trying to confront. Pero pag tinakbuhan mo lang, that's a form of cowardice, not non-violence. Parang sa i-connect natin ngayon, no? Malapit na naman ng election. Pag sinabi mo, ay Ekon, kahit sino na or bahala na kung sino manalo. Now you're not fighting already for what is right, and that's not non-violence. That's just pure cowardice, no? Takot ka lang, but you're not fighting for it. And sabi ni Gandhi, that's the difficult part of ahimsa, to do action, no? Action, very paradoxical na statement. Action through non-action. 'Di ba? Ang ganda, through action through non-action. So, 'yun. And in order for positive ahimsa to be done, sabi niya, you should actively resist evil. No? And sabi ni Gandhi, if you've perfected the concept of ahimsa, then it is already, no, you already that's the top, no? Top or summit of every virtues. Lahat daw ng virtues, kindness, babalik sa ahimsa. No, justice, babalik sa ahimsa. Truth, babalik sa concept ng ahimsa. Because for Gandhi, ahimsa is the summit of all virtues. So, how do we complete ahimsa? No? Paano na natin mako-complete ang concept ng ahimsa? By way of this, what we call true non-violence. Paano mo na ngayon makukuha yung goal mo na non-violence or true non-violence? Sabi ni Gandhi, it is a combination of the positive plus equals naman na yan, plus negative is equals the non-violence of the strong. Yan yung tawag niya, no? The non-violence of the strong is both the adding of the positive and the negative sides of ahimsa or non-violence. So anong example daw nito, no? Or ano dapat ang paano daw to isa buhay? Sabi ni Gandhi, true soldiers are non-violent, no? Yung mga isinasabuhay talaga nila, yung pagiging sundalo nila. How? Kasi they can strike, no? They can attack if they wish, but they don't. That's non-violence, 'di ba? They train to fight, but they only fight when needed. That's non-violence, no? Sabi ni Gandhi. Hi, ma'am. And a quote from Gandhi, sabi niya, a man cannot then practice ahimsa or non-violence and be a coward at the same time. The practice of ahimsa calls forth the greatest courage. It is not the most soldiers of a soldier's virtue. A soldier who needs the protection of even a stick is to that extent so much the less a soldier. He is the true soldier who knows how to die and stand his ground in the midst of a hail of bullets. So binaliktad na, no? Non-violence is not cowardice but instead it is courage. Diba? Sobrang bumaliktad na ngayon ng concept ng ahimsa. It's by being courageous. Sabi niya, we may never be strong enough to be entirely non-violent in thought, word, and deed. But we must keep non-violence as our goal and make strong progress towards it. So ito naman ngayon ang problem of ahimsa, no? Yung loophole niya, no? Kasi nga man is imperfect. And because man is imperfect, he cannot reach total ahimsa or total non-violence. Kasi sabi nga ni Gandhi, I've been living my life through non-violence, sabi niya. But I see myself as someone that is still not complete with this non-violence. So yung imagine that yung tao na sobrang nakadikit na sa kanya ang pangalan sa kanyang pangalan ang concept ng ahimsa, na pag binanggit mo ahimsa or non-violent revolution, naiisip mo agad Gandhi. Pero sabi ni Gandhi, hindi pa daw perfect yung kanyang non-violence. And how much more sa atin? No? Pero anong sabi ni Gandhi? So, susukuan mo na lang ba ang non-violence? No, sabi ni Gandhi, it is our goal, no? And we progress towards it. But the problem is we will never reach its full potential. But there's no harm in trying. Diba? We should still try. So, yon. So, non-violence is practical and moral. So, non-violence is more effective than violence in the long run. So, ito na ngayon kung sabi niya, bakit mas maganda ang bloodless revolution kaysa sa bloody revolution? Ang sabi ni Gandhi, because violence only destroys the roots. No? I mean, violence only causes roots to go deeper and only strikes the surface. But ahimsa strikes at the root of the problem, which is anger and hatred, sabi ni Gandhi. Meaning that, in a way, ahimsa is more practical on the long run. No? Kung gusto mo ng mas mahabang peace, instead of gaining it through violence, you gain it through non-violence. Kasi it's more effective, sabi ni Gandhi, in the long run. So, sabi pa ni Gandhi, not only that non-violence is the right thing to do, but it is the practical thing to do if we want to consider the long-term good. But, sabi niya, non-violence or ahimsa needs action. It's not just hindi ka gumalaw, that's non-violence. No? You have to still act. No, especially at times it calls for direct non-involvement resistance and civil disobedience. Now, I remember this movie, Great Debater, sabi nung isa dun, how do you defend whether non-violence or civil disobedience is right kahit na mali ang pagkontra sa batas? Sabi niya, kung meron ng batas na sobra nang inaapakan ang pagkatao ng mga citizens, then it's right to commit civil disobedience. Parang sa mga panahon ng mga Black Americans, bakit sila nagkaroon ng revolution or civil disobedience? Kasi naapakan na yung human rights nila. So instead of hindi mo na lang pansinin, hayaan mo na lang, they fought for it. And yun yung precisely na gusto ni Gandhi sa concept ng ahimsa. And the real challenge now is to practice non-violence every day of your life. Sabi ni Gandhi. So, yun. So, and isa pang more important na concept niya is non-possession. Non-possession. Dapat daw ang mga needs mo or yung mga gamit mo is just the essentials. Kaya nga si Gandhi vegetarian, di ba? Tapos kasi nga yung pagkain niya ng less is not to hurt himself. Di ba yung hunger strike? Di ba ginawa niya yon? It's not to eat less. It's not to harm himself. But para yung natipid niya na hindi niya nakakain, he can give it to the poor. It's a very, di ba ganyan din yung concept natin pag Lent sa ating mga Katoliko. No, bakit? Kasi connected yung concept ng almsgiving sa concept nung pag ano na yun yung pagbawas natin sa kinakain natin, 'di ba? So, yun, fasting. It's connected to the concept of almsgiving. Kasi yung hindi mo ngayon nagastos para sa pagkain, ibibigay mo sa nangangailangan, which is a form of almsgiving. And ganon din yung concept ni Gandhi. Sabi niya, we should live simply for that others may simply live. No, yun lang naman yung concept ni Gandhi sa kanyang non-violence and yun yung concept niya ng ahimsa and satyagraha. So yun. Gets? Kamasutra.
Yes, sir.
Ano
Yes.
pa? Wala na. To end this, sabi nung isang quote ni Gandhi. Di ba yung tinanong siya noon? Tinanong si Gandhi sa kanyang idea ng yung mga punishment na kung saan very harsh na ang punishment. 'Di ba yung concept ng eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, 'di ba? Very very masyado na siyang brutal. Sabi ni Gandhi sa ganun na concept. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth leaves the society blind and toothless. No, kasi pag ganun lahat ng ginagawa, bulag na at puro bugi na ang mga tao. And tama naman yung sabi niya, no? So, yun. Any questions kay Mahatma Gandhi?
Wala, sir.
Wala. So, baka walang pasok bukas. So, hindi tayo mag-meet. Pero at least, natapos natin yung isang philosopher. Sa next meeting, baka kuwan na tayo. Buddhism or Japanese philosophy. Tignan ko kung ano yung mas
Japanese
magandang i-topic. Japanese yung gusto daw ni Jad eh.
Japanese.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Japanese philosophy.
Concept of so, yun. So, na yung stop recording dito.